Every day there is a forgetting, and every moment there is the possibility of remembering. Remembering who you truly are, awakening to your body, to the inner world and experience of being alive. Here is where you find the beauty, the joy. Here is where you free your soma.
Hello and welcome to Free Your Soma, Stories of Somatic Awakening and How to Live from the Inside Out. Welcome. Today I have Gemini Ferrie with me, and she is a love coach for women who specializes in helping women with their self-love, their self-esteem, and their emotional intelligence. She helps them understand their love lives so they can create the relationship that they want, which is a really exciting, interesting thing to be helping people with in this world, especially in today's culture where, we've got like kind of dating on, speed dial and like all these different ways that people are connecting. I'm sure that's been like, part of understanding our love life. We're like taking it to a new level. It's, not just like the dynamics of our relationships that we might already have like established. It's like the newness, right? Creating new relationships that people are doing all the time. So all of that's really exciting. We're going to talk about some of that today and how when we start to understand what's going on internally, we can then create something outside of ourselves from that inner experience. So welcome, Jen.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yes. I love the title of love the name of your podcast, Living from the Inside Out, because everything does begin and end with us. And that's very much connected to this idea of radical personal responsibility that I like to teach people and keep benefiting from myself.
Yeah, it's definitely like if you're going to teach this, you need to know it inside and out, which means you have to be practicing it.
Yes, very much. Otherwise, they're going to be words in the wind. They go in one ear and out the other.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. And that's not going to provide anybody with actual help or change, which is what people are really looking for, especially when it comes to, problems that they're facing in their relationships. And what I really love about your distinction here, especially when we kind of talk about like what you're specializing in, is that you're pointing to love in our outside environment starts from love that we're creating internally and our relationship with ourselves. Say a little bit about that.
Yes, so much to say about this. So, the first thing that comes to mind is about our relationship to love, our experience of loving and being loved growing up. And of course, as children, we depend on our parents for feeling loved and seen and validated. And that is all good. That is great and healthy, and that's what our parents, part of what our parents are there for. But then as we become adults and we leave the house and start to make our own life, we have to guide ourselves or find somebody to help guide us to upgrading our relationship to love in terms of what our idea is for how we want to give and receive love. And if we don't go through that process of self-inquiry, then what ends up happening is that we just keep repeating the patterns of our experience of love from childhood in adult life. And that can be very, very unhealthy, unsatisfying, very, very painful. And so it's important to upgrade our idea of love to one that says, I am not the only source of love for myself, but I am the first and I am the main source of love and validation and support for myself. And then comes everyone else. And so, if we do it the other way around, where we're trying to get a feeling of love and validation from other people and we make other people the main source of that, then we're left with all kinds of patterns like being desperate for love and chasing love, people pleasing, abandoning our needs and our preferences so that we can try to get this love from other people. And so when we go through that emotional growing up, I would say, when we choose to learn how to become the main source of our own love, it's a very empowering place to have all kinds of relationships, both personal, business, and romantic relationships.
That's incredible. Yes, growing up, this maturing our
Mm-hmm.
perspective and of our like inner experience of what love is. Because as you said, as children, we're sort of on the receiving end, right,
Mm-hmm.
of whatever that looks like, whether or not it's, a pleasant or unpleasant experience, or usually a mix of both, right? And you're
Yes.
talking about rewriting like the conditioning that we have been kind of maintaining, and that
Mm-hmm.
the problems that are showing up as we go into adulthood with these models from childhood, we're in a state of being kind of helpless as we were as children, instead
Mm-hmm.
of actually directing and in the full experience of what we're capable of as adults, what we're really capable
Mm-hmm.
of, right? That's really
Totally.
really incredible work that you're doing, and you probably have your own story about how you got into this and how this, I guess, realization arose in you. um
Mm-hmm.
Share with us about kind of where this started for you. Where did all this begin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really do believe that we come in with a purpose, a reason for what we're here to share with the world, to help advance the world in some way. And so, and also another idea, another philosophy that I really live by because it's so empowering and it really works is that everything and everybody, every experience that I've ever had is here, has always been here for me, for my evolution, for my growth, and for my learning. And I do believe that's true for everybody as well. And so my story really begins with a memory that I have of being about 4 years old. And my grandma was watching the news, and I had heard something about war and some images on the screen. And, as a 4 year old, I thought, war, is that like grown-ups hitting each other? And in my head, it just didn't make sense at all. And I thought, well, why don't they just talk about it, whatever issue they're having? And so, I think that really is the first expression of my life's work around the opposite of war, which is, really peace with each other, peace within. And I know that's it. I'm not trying to, come up with a rosy kind of pie in the sky idea. But what I'm really saying is that it's about making the effort to use every challenge as an opportunity for growth rather than as an opportunity for blaming or hurting someone back. So that was that moment. And then I felt like love was very missing in my life growing up. I Growing up, I was either adored and so deeply loved and praised, or I was being deeply shamed. And so I got those things really, really mixed up. And I became overly independent because I just felt like I wasn't getting the love that I needed on a consistent basis. And so I just became very overly self-sufficient. And so in my 20s and part of my 30s, I dated a lot like crazy because I was trying to find the one. And so I, was trying to turn a lot of guys into the one. I was dating somebody based on the fantasy that I had about them rather than who they really were. I was ignoring red flags. I was trying to get men to love me, and I was trying to get men to see how wonderful I am. And so because my ego mind tricked me into having a sense of confidence, like, I know I'm wonderful, somebody else is going to think I'm wonderful, so let me try to convince somebody to
Yeah.
see that. That wasn't true confidence. And I see this in a lot of women where their mind creates this false sense of confidence to cover up something that is not working inside, some kind of approach to love that's not working. And so I dated and dated. I tried my darnest best to get love back. And then the one relationship that really shattered my illusion of love at the time, with the happily ever after idea, and that mainstream culture teaches little girls, is that I was in a relationship for I think it was 3 months with somebody, and I did my absolute best to get this guy to love me. And then he still didn't love me, and he was very awful to me. so awful, disrespectful, demeaning, that I was too embarrassed to talk to my very close girlfriends about how I was being treated, because I knew that they would call me out on that, and I just was too attached. And so when I realized, oh my God, this guy is never going to love me. And I remember that was one of the most devastating days of my life, because I was so infatuated by the idea of love that I had this false realization that felt true at the time, which said, maybe love doesn't happen for everybody. Maybe it only happens for some people, but not for me. And so then I had this, realization that life is really long, and if I'm going to be single the rest of my life because I'm never going to have love, then I better freaking learn how to be happy without a man. And that idea just was crazy to me, because I'm from Central America. I'm from Nicaragua, and Latin culture, it's like it's all about the family, And so to just imagine the rest of my life, like trying to figure out how to be happy, I knew that I had to do that. Otherwise, my life was not going to go very well. And so, and this is a question that I actually encounter from women a lot, that they're only going to be happy when they find this person, and if they don't find this person, they're going to be very, very miserable. And so this is a representation of trying to live from the outside in, right? Like, I will be happy when this person comes into my life and gives me this thing. And so I am so grateful for my spirit guiding me to this man who never loved me, no matter how I tried, because this person was the catalyst of my fantasy of love just shattering. And so I had to start from scratch. And then I really lived into the answer of, how can I be happy without a man? And the answer is actually quite simple. And this is exactly what I teach women. The answer is, how to be happy without a man is you give to yourself all the love and the attention, the affection, the warmth, the comfort that you have been trying to desperately get from a man, or from anybody really. You give that to yourself. You pour that love into yourself. And furthermore, all the love that you think you didn't get from your parents, you start pouring all that love into yourself as well. And so I started to do that. And then one day I woke up, Amy, and I looked at myself in the mirror and I thought, oh my God, what a cosmic joke. The love that I've been dreaming of is me. It's me. I am the one. I'm the one I've been hoping to love and be loved by. And then I knew I was going to be more than okay for the rest of my life, single. And then, of course, a few days later, I meet somebody amazing. We get into an awesome relationship until it ended and it wasn't so awesome anymore. And then I met my husband and got into a relationship with him. And here we are, 8+ years later, still going strong, and in a relationship in which we're, really growing and learning and healing so much all the time. So, when I decided to become a love coach for women, it was right after I had that moment of like, oh my goddess, I'm the love of my life, And then I realized, wait, that was actually quite simple. I want to teach all women who think they can't get love, who are desperate for it or have questions about it. I want to show them that the love they've been looking for is right there inside of them. And it's an endless treasure of love inside. And I just, that really is what drives me, is the fact that it's so simple and you don't have to wait for anybody to show up or to change or to give you anything at all.
That's such an incredible story. I mean, I loved how you traced it all the way back, like this innocence, right, to your childhood of seeing, the fighting and the struggle and thinking there must be a simple way. And then later on in your life, there's that struggle again. Maybe you even felt defeated and you decided to rise back up and take, back that like control by saying, I won't need a man. I'm just going to figure out how to do this without anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then in a way kind of turning that independence on its head, and instead of it being isolating, it becomes this source of incredible power for
Mm-hmm.
for you. And that's like really an amazing experience to go through, because you ultimately realized that like like the person who was in charge of this the whole time was you. While you
Yes.
thought it was everything else, and you thought that all the circumstances needed to
Mm-hmm.
change, and this person
Mm-hmm.
that way, and you needed to meet that special person, the shift that actually needed to take place, the change that needed to happen was inside of you. And that's
Mm-hmm.
such a powerful place to arrive at. And
Mm.
then you see how, like you said, anybody can experience this, because
Mm-hmm.
inside all of us. And I
Yes.
absolutely love that message. I think that that's really potent, and I think that that's actually the way to get really deep transformation to occur in
Mm-hmm.
our reality, is by recognizing that this whole time, no matter how we thought that, it had to be that job or the money or the outside,
Mm.
it's the inner world, and it's the cultivation and
Mm-hmm.
of being with ourselves in that inner environment as it's shifting and changing, as we're in
Mm-hmm.
all these, tender spaces or intense emotions. And I know you work quite a lot with that, right? The emotional,
Definitely.
because here we go. We'll kind of jump into this now.
Mm-hmm.
As people are traveling down this new path with you of, okay, I'm game. I'm going to love myself. I'm going to be
Mm-hmm.
life. It's not always smooth sailing. And that's why guidance is incredibly important, is because there's going to be stuff that comes up that's in the
Mm-hmm.
way of you loving yourself,
Absolutely.
that has been in the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
things come up for people as you're working through this path towards self-love.
What was your question?
What things come up for people? What are
Mm.
kind of
Mm.
you work on helping people shift to get to
Mm-hmm.
the point?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, lots of things. I would say the main things, Amy, that I hear from women that are really the biggest blocks to the love that they want, not only with themselves, but with somebody special, is a fear of rejection
Mm.
or a fear of abandonment. And they're really two sides of the same coin. And that one fear alone, whether it's a fear of abandonment or rejection, that one fear alone will create an entire world of emotions, behaviors, and results. And a lot of those behaviors are very much from a place of insecurity. If somebody, if you're afraid of being rejected, or abandoned, you're going to be insecure. You're going to watch your words. You're going to wonder what to say and how to be, what parts of yourself to show or not to show, what parts are going to be acceptable to the person in front of you, and what parts do you think are not going to be acceptable for whatever reason. And then those parts, you're going to hide them. And then that hiding of parts of ourselves is a form of emotional self-abandonment, right? Because if we feel ashamed of a part of us because we believe it's not going to be accepted by somebody else, that's a projection, because we're actually doing the very thing that we don't want somebody else to do to us. We are rejecting a part of us before somebody rejects that part, and then that part goes into the dark. It gets disconnected from our own love and our own validation, and then that part will get very, very hurt, and a lot of uncomfortable, unpleasant emotions will come up that will get louder and louder and louder, so that we could pay attention to the part of us that's needing us. And we could fool somebody for some time by only showing the best parts of us. But deep inside, we're going to be worrying that if and when they see those other parts that we didn't show, then we're going to get rejected. So then it creates anxiety and tension, and people live in these relationships like that in their heads and not in their bodies.
Yes.
And so it's just that one fear, fear of rejection and abandonment just creates absolute havoc in relationships and in the relationship with the self, because it creates such a great disconnect and level of self abandonment that most people don't even know that they're doing.
Yes. I could relate to so much of what you said. I think I spent some of my early years self-abandoning a lot, especially in relationships where, like you said, there's some part of you that's unacceptable. And what
Mm-hmm.
you in when you enter that state is you're then losing your naturalness. You're losing that natural just being who you are. And now you're fragmented and now you're cautious. And
Uh-huh.
now you don't actually get to really be in your
Mm-hmm.
body and experience love. So what I noticed, and maybe you can speak to this too, is that when I was in that process of judging myself and then compartmentalizing things and hiding, parts of myself from my partner, it actually shut me down in a way that even if I did have a partner who was trying to pour that love onto me, it like
Mm-hmm.
enter, it like wouldn't go in. And
Yep.
I feel rejected, even though they were like literally sitting there next to me
Mm-hmm.
with love in their eyes. I would feel rejected because the rejection was happening inside of me.
That's right. Exactly. Because when we hide a part of ourselves because we're ashamed of it, we don't accept it because it doesn't match this idea of who we should be, then those parts of us begin to influence and be in charge of the decisions that we make and the perceptions, the filters from which we perceive reality.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you can be, experience. It's bizarre. I mean, I think there's probably people out there who can understand this. You can be sitting there, right? Like at the dinner with your sweetheart, and you can feel totally alone. If
Completely disconnected.
you can feel that
Yes.
way, and it can feel
Mm-hmm.
very frustrating and confusing as to why. And then, of course, what
Mm-hmm.
we do is we try to blame the other person, right? We try to come up with it's something they're doing. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that they are doing that
Mm-hmm.
change, and then I'll feel loved. Then I'll feel, not rejected. I'll feel like, yeah, cared for. But what's going on is this internal thing of the self-rejection, the self-abandonment. And if that's not actually taken apart and looked at, it's going to just be part of this systemic problem that's going to keep us feeling alone and maybe even actually keep
Uh-huh.
it and drive that relationship away, right?
Exactly, right? Because we can't help but prove to ourselves
Mm.
what we believe. Anything that we encounter, especially in personal relationship, that doesn't quite match our belief, we're gonna unconsciously most of the time disregard it. When we have a fear of rejection or abandonment, any little thing is gonna be seen from that lens of that person's gonna reject me. They're probably already thinking about breaking up with me. I have to prepare an exit strategy for when they break up with me. And that's not a way to really be deeply emotionally intimate in a relationship. It's very stressful, and I know from personal experience I've totally been there. And the thing is it doesn't necessarily mean that that people have to heal or completely overcome their fear of abandonment or rejection to meet a loving person. I mean, look at you met somebody loving, and you weren't able to let it in, but nonetheless you met somebody loving. And so I think this is a really important thing for women who are on a path of personal development, spiritual women, to really know you don't have to fix yourself all the way. You don't have to overcome this long list of issues in order to attract somebody, because you heal together. When you
Mhm.
meet the right person, you heal together, because it's not like you meet somebody and then all your issues are gone, you know?
Yes, that's really true. I mean, my husband and I mean, sometimes I look back on, the last few years and all the stuff that we went through that was really
Mm,
ridiculously hard.
mm.
I'm sure there's plenty of people who are watching from the outside being like, they won't make it a year, because I
Uh,
didn't believe it at the time. But
uh-huh.
we heal together when we're actually willing to put in the work. And it's not like trying to like work on each other at all. It's actually
Mm-mm.
work that takes place inside, and the
Mm-hmm.
shifting and changing comes through repeated experience of this problem or this issue coming up. And each
Mm-hmm.
time, no matter how upsetting or confronting it is, we make even just a 2% change in how we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly that starts multiplying. And now,
Mm,
it comes up and it's like 25% change. It went from
mm,
that 2%, but it increased incrementally every time we came across this issue. And now we're doing a lot better with this than we were a month ago,
wonderful.
So not giving up on having that same conversation, talking about that same issue again.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we get exhausted with it and we want to walk away from it, but it's actually in the practice of facing these things that we get better and better at facing them. And then we get better at solving them. The solving kind of naturally,
Mm-hmm.
the more that we practice, just like we get better at anything that we're doing. And this probably translates to the work that you do with women. Like they may have the same issue come up multiple times with you while you're working together. And each time they're able to maybe reframe it just a little bit and just a little bit. And then all of a sudden there might be a breakthrough.
Mm-hmm.
You could just describe that process a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely takes practice because we learn by repetition. So hearing one time, I love you, I'm here for you, that's not going to cut it in any relationship. We need to feel loved all the time. And so we need to provide that love to ourselves, right? So that consistently, so that it can feel real and true when somebody gives that love to ourselves. But the process is, because we learn by repetition, you hear something once, there's an aha, like, oh yeah, I can see it from that way. That really makes sense. And sometimes it's not like that. Sometimes people are like super attached to the way they've been thinking and believing about themselves or about love, that they're scared to let go of that because they're scared of the possible disappointment if they try on this new empowering perspective and it's not cut out to be what it sounds like it's going to be. And so they want to hold on because at least they have a sense of safety in the reliability of how they know this pain operates, right? And so, but either way, it does take a little bit of repetition. So the person sees a new way, and then there's a practice. I give them a practice. Like, I want you to, when this fear comes up, I want you to tell yourself this mantra. Is that true? There's a lot of depends on the person and where they're at, but, is that thought true? Or creating a self boundary where I say, just for the next week, just for the next couple of weeks, you're going to make an experiment. And for you to see if you like the results, you can keep them. And if you don't, you could always go back, right? So it's a very safe way of trying on a new idea. So I say, when this fear of XYZ comes up, I want you to say, I'm not doing that for the next week. And then see what else shows up. If that is not an option to go to that fear, to give into that fear, then you're going to naturally come up with a different way of thinking and feeling about yourself. And you can discover that, right? Another exercise that I like to give people is noticing the thought that represents the fear or the disempowering belief, and not trying to fix it or change it in any way, shape, or form, because that's too much work for the brain. And to just notice, oh, there is that pattern. Oh, there it is again. Oh, there it is again. Because the more you can observe a thought, the more space you create between you, the observer, and the thought. And the more you can observe that thought, the less power it has over you, because suddenly you are not overwhelmed, encompassed inside of the thought to the degree that it is the only reality, but you're observing it as part of your experience. So with that, then we talk about what did they learn? What did they see? What did they discover that they didn't experience before? And then the excitement that they get from that kind of practice then leads, to a deeper practice of then not just noticing, but how about trying on living into a different idea about themselves? Not because it's true. I'm not going to try to convince anybody that some positive idea about them is true. They have to see it for themselves. They have to try it on. So it's a lot of experimenting, and that can be really fun, as opposed to like, I got all this work to do and it's going to take forever. It's just a series of experiments that I like to do with people so that it can remain lighthearted in that process of shifting from a limiting idea of oneself to an empowering one.
Yes, it's a process of exploration, because it's going to be a
Yeah.
little bit different for everybody.
Yes.
And people are also probably going to come up with their own ideas
Yep.
and their own solutions to their problems, which from my perspective, when that happens with me and my clients, I'm always just like, wow, like you really expert on you.
Yeah, exactly.
How did you come up with that? That is so unique, original, and like personal to you. And I love that, like that
Yeah.
arose because of this process of exploration, of breaking out of that rigidity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Starting to explore. And I love that you bring like a playfulness into it. And that's, that's something that, comes across in your energy. It comes in across in the way you dress and the way you hold your,
Mm.
like you like to have fun with these things. And I think that's
Yes.
so important because we can get so super serious when we're in our head,
Totally.
especially
Mm-hmm.
about things that hurt, and
Yeah.
things that are hard. We can get like really
Mm-hmm.
downtrodden and like, gray. And you come in with all this color and this brightness in your expression. And I think that that's part of what makes you so effective and also probably so successful at doing this because you've been
Mm-hmm.
11 years, that's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of time to be working with different people and, figuring out on your end the exploration of like what's really working for
Mm-hmm.
people. What are some of the reliable, ways to help them shift their mindset. And, I'm curious, as, someone who's been a love coach for 11 years, this has probably also been like the other side of the coin of your own personal development too.
Oh, yes.
Because when we're teaching, this is another expression of our own learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. Oh my goddess. One funny way that I look at my business and what I do as a coach and as a guide is really my clients are funding my own personal research and studies and experimentation and exploration in the realm of all things self-love, self-esteem, self-confidence, how to create healthy, loving relationships with people and deepening those relationships. And if I didn't have this as a career, I would be, in the conversation of personal development, in the path, very engaged of personal development all the time. I feel like I eat, think, drink, sleep personal development. It's my life. And so I do see that as I go deeper into my own journey of healing and growth, then I can bring those insights to my clients. And oftentimes, what I'm teaching people is exactly what I need to hear from myself in that moment. And I'm tend to be very transparent and honest with my clients because oftentimes people think, oh, Gemini is a love coach. She's got it all together. She has no issues whatsoever. And so I make sure that I, bust that bubble and just share a little bit about my process. And sometimes I tell people, I'm just a few steps ahead of you in this particular thing, just so you know. And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah, I'm human just like you, or wow, I was just there a year ago. Man, I know exactly what you're experiencing. Let me share a little bit about what that was like for me and how I overcame that. And then I'm going to show you how to do the same. And people really appreciate that because they're like, oh, okay, I'm okay then. I have issues. Everybody has growing opportunities. I'm like, yes, we're all in this journey together.
Yeah. Well, you make it feel attainable then because
Uh-huh.
not this like perfect person up there in the clouds, like with the perfect life. They get to
Mm-hmm.
it's human. And so therefore the results that you're experiencing or the, results that you're telling them are possible are suddenly like actually within reach instead of this thing that's far away,
Yeah.
right? Where people usually start when they've been feeling, not great in their body
Mm-hmm.
lives. They think that feeling good and that feeling loved and that feeling like their relationships are working is like really far away. And
Mm-hmm.
to be able to have a coach who's there and you can relate to them and they can relate to you, it's like you just condense that imaginary space from thousands
Mm-hmm.
of miles to like, oh, we're just around the corner from each other.
Totally. And a quote that really emphasizes what you just said is a quote from my professors at the University of Santa Monica for spiritual psychology. It's a very incredible school, by the way. So they say that how you relate to the issue is the issue, right? And so if people come feeling so broken, so disconnected, so just like far away from the love that they want with themselves and other people, then it's not like, well, first you have to heal these 10 things and then you're going to feel better. Oh, no, no. You can start feeling better right now, because how you relate to the issue is the issue. So if you're missing love, if you feel broken and sad and lonely and all of that, and you feel very, very far away from love, well, and guess what? You can access that love right now from where you stand with everything that you're experiencing and feeling, and you do not have to get anywhere at all. This moment right here has the love that you want, and it's about learning how to access that love now so that you can get the comfort and the sense of relief and the sense of warmth from yourself with what is present for you.
Oh yeah, I really relate to that, like in terms of the work that I do with, muscles. And it's funny because these things that you're talking about, like they're about like human experience. Like ultimately, they're about
Mm.
our physical reality even, So like the kind of answer to the question is in the question, right? Like that kind of,
Mm-hmm.
but like people will come to me work with pain in their body somewhere, and they think like they're like, oh, something needs to shift, like something needs to change in order for this pain to go away, and we
Mm.
bring attention to it, and we do like some really subtle movements, and the pain just dissipates. And it's like
Wow.
their ability to move was there the whole time. Like they could have moved their arm in this particular way at any moment and the pain would vanish, right? but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but but the issue was that they had this relationship to it that said, this is fixed, this is stuck, this doesn't change. And that was part of the frozenness that was holding that pain. Part
Yeah.
of the contraction that was keeping them there was
Mm-hmm.
it was that relationship to the discomfort, to the pain in their body. So reframing these things so that they can see that the
Mm-hmm.
possibilities are all happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
Huge. It's like magic. If people will
Mm-hmm.
feel, right? Like it's like their minds are blown. They're like, this was here, like this at any moment, really?
Totally.
Actually
And
closer to how our universe works, right?
what do you mean? Tell me more.
But that anything and everything is actually possible at any given
Yes,
moment, regardless of whether or not we can perceive that.
it is just a shift in perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the main thing that I see people really wanting or wanting more of or feeling just disconnected from, not understanding it, is love. We all, I believe, the main purpose that we're here for as human beings is to love and to be loved, to experience love. Everything else is secondary. Everything else, if you have everything else and you don't have love, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't mean anything without that experience of love with ourselves or with somebody else. And so, one of the things that I do in the first session with people, because in the first session, I want people to be completely blown away by the love inside of them. Because if I can get them to see even just a little bit of that magnificent love that is within them, they have not known how to access, then I know that that will give them the confidence to know that they can get to the place that they wish to get to inside of themselves. And so the way that I do that is that we focus, we focus on the emotion that they've had the most difficulty with. And this is where the emotional intelligence really comes in, which is a form of self-love for me. Is I get them to, consider what is the most unpleasant, difficult emotion that they have been running away from, judging, pretending is not there. What is the emotion that they've been shaming, hiding, glossing over with whatever distraction, food, TV, sex, drugs, rock and roll, and we want to actually use that, because if I can get them to shift their experience of the most challenging part of being alive, which always for people it's an emotion, then they, again, that confidence and that sense of self-trust really gets activated. And so I asked them, tell me what that emotion is, that most challenging emotion. What have you been doing about it when it comes up? And they tell me, oh, I talk on the phone, I watch TV, I eat cookies, I meditate, I run, I do exercise, what have you. And all of that is, some of those things are great. Like exercise, great. Meditation, great. And you've got to address the emotion on a much deeper level. And when it's a negative, unhealthy distraction, or deep self-judgment of an unpleasant emotion, then I always ask, what is your intention with these methods of how you're dealing with those emotions? And they often say, well, I just want to feel better. I just want to feel better. And I'm like, great. Is it working? Are you feeling better with all of these distraction techniques? And of course, the answer is always no. And so I say, look, let me show you a different way to feel better, to accomplish your goal of feeling better. And it's actually so simple, Amy, because all it requires is what I call the 1, 2, 3 exercise. It's an emotional intelligence self-love exercise. So number 1, you put your hand where you feel it. Number 2, you breathe love into it. And if you can't breathe love into it, it's just too much to ask for. It's okay. You can just breathe into that space. And then number 3, you say to yourself, you say to that part of you that's experiencing that emotion, I'm right here. And you feel that. And it's a little bit more elaborate. It's about a 20, 30-minute process, when I do this with clients, because it's a whole dialogue where I get the person to own up to their previous way of being with themselves, self-neglect, self-judgment, self-shaming. I get them to own up to that without making themselves feel bad. And then I get them to set a new intention for how they want to be in relationship with that part. And that really creates such a profound shift, because that's when they really recognize, like, holy wow, I have been trying to feel better in all of these ways, and I've just been making myself feel worse. And now I've made myself feel so much better by simply giving to myself a little bit of loving attention and acknowledgement and validation for what I'm feeling.
Yes, I remember when one of the last times that we saw each other, you guided everyone through this technique. And even with that other stuff, which would, of course, like really deepen it for somebody.
Yeah.
But I think everybody in the room felt a shift within themselves where they can their body, and they felt where they've been holding their, their pain, and said those words, I'm right here with you. And, to me, I think of it as it is literally like creating connection, because you put your hand there, bring neural awareness, you're connecting your nervous system to that part of your body where the sensation is arising, where you're holding upset, and then you're actually reinforcing that connection deeper through those words, and you're bringing new awareness and literally, I think, probably new like energy to that space.
Yes.
It's going to start moving it out. That's actually going to start clearing things and moving it where it was stuck before. And so this makes sense to me on a few levels. And I think it's just brilliant and incredible. And I love the simplicity of it, because it's something that you can, go through this process and teach somebody, and then they can do it anytime they need it. And they don't need a manual. They don't need a book. They can just be there with themselves.
Yep.
That is such a gift. That is so incredible.
So simple. So simple. It really is so simple, because, people say, oh, I gotta have all these issues and I have to fix these things. I have to fix myself. And, I say, no, we do not need to be fixed. We're not robots or machines that are broken. We are human beings. We have, all of us have some kind of hurt inside. And what we need when we're hurting is love, not fixing. And so, and that brings me to another quote from my professors at USM, which is, healing is the application of love to the parts that hurt inside. Nothing in there says healing is finding a boyfriend, making more money, getting more successful, getting on TV, having more stuff or whatever. It's not going to come from the outside. We need some. external validation. We need to be surrounded by people who see our greatness and encourage it. And that is a form of healthy external validation, but we can't make that the main thing. We've got to be the main source of that love and that validation that we need.
Yeah, beautifully said, because there is, going back to way in the beginning when you talked about this hyper independence that you had going on, that was sort of a response, it sounds like, to some elements in your childhood
Mm-hmm.
where you had love and shame enmeshed. And obviously, like, shame is painful. And so you kind of want to avoid like having to need anything from anybody, needing that love, right?
Uh-huh.
By becoming hyper independent, so that you don't have to feel the thing that you think comes along with it, which is shame, right?
Yep,
But
that's
that can
right.
become its own trap, but it's beautiful the way that it kind of did a little cycle with you, where it was actually through that independence, that tendency to be independent, that you discovered that self-love was the key, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then that brought you back around to that, that validation from others is also wonderful.
Exactly.
In its own way, it's necessary for us
Mm-hmm.
to complete that experience of love, because when we are validated by others, we learn also how to validate others and how to give love when we're able to receive it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just
Mm-hmm.
from ourselves, but from other people too. So it's a practice that starts inside, and I'd say most of the work is inside, but then
Yeah.
it starts moving out into the rest of our world. Would you talk a little bit about how people's relationships transform when they start doing this work?
Totally. Well, the thing about external validation is this is so funny because it's a funny paradox, I should say, where the more we try to get external validation, the less we're gonna get it, and the more desperate we're gonna be for it. But when we give to ourselves the validation that we need, then we just don't need external validation, and then suddenly there's all this external validation just pouring in, from all directions, and I think what explains that is that everything begins and ends with us, and we see the world through the filters that are made up of our beliefs, our values, our perception of ourselves, and our philosophies and ideas about how reality works. And so, in other words, what we see outside of ourselves is what is already going on inside of us, right? It's a projection, and just like there's two different people could explain a particular event in two totally different ways. It's that kind of projection, is a way of reality reflecting back to us what is already inside of us. So I'll give you an example of that. So I many years ago, had somebody been disrespectful, inappropriate, mean, what have you to me, I may have wanted to be adversarial and then been mean back, or I would have been in a place of victim and blaming them for how I felt. And that's one way, and through the work that I've done in myself and that I continue to do, if somebody, and this actually happened very recently, but if somebody is inappropriate, mean, in any way, now it's like, oh gosh, that person must really be hurting inside to be that mean to me. When asking for a particular need or setting a boundary or calling somebody out on something that didn't work for me. And so, the difference is really now I'm more connected to a sense of compassion for myself. And I love the Dalai Lama's definition of compassion, which is compassion is the understanding for the lack of understanding. And so I have that practice more deeply with myself than ever before, such that somebody was a certain way and I could extend that practice with myself toward them and about them. And in the past, I would have not been able to do that. I would have gotten caught up in my own, hurt and trigger and projected onto them. And so this is how much power we have over our reality, over the quality of our relationships. And the great thing to know is that when a relationship, when, especially when many of our relationships aren't working, if we see a pattern in multiple relationships that isn't working, then the first place to look is right here inside of ourselves, because we're generating that pattern, right? And so if we're generating it, we can change it from within, and we can then show up differently with the people in our lives.
Yes, absolutely. We can show up differently. I think that's so, it's so interesting because again, you're pointing to this idea that it's not other people that need to like shift and change. It's how we're showing up, and then that's being reflected immediately in our environment. So
Mm-hmm.
kind of like we're almost believing it into being true. And you kind of touched on that before in terms of we have this belief, right? And then we make it true. We look around and we look for evidence that this
Yes.
is the case. But the good news is that when we shift our behaviors and patterns into something that's actually healthy, then
Mm-hmm.
it's true too. We look around and we see all the things that are going right, all the things
Yes.
that are actually working, right? And then when we are putting our focus on what's actually working, now suddenly things start working even more. Like they start, we're in this different perspective. We're in this different kind of reality where now there's movement forward instead of feeling like everything is fixed and maybe, you know, drifting or falling behind. There's suddenly like a new,
Totally.
yeah. So this is
Absolutely.
because what you're talking about is shifting relationships with our relationship to ourselves, but I'm sure every
Mm-hmm.
aspect of people's lives starts to shift as well, right? Because
Absolutely.
relationship, that foundational relationship is so major, right? And you make it really simple by kind of drawing everything in to self-love, but it really does like expand out into our work life, into like the relationships with like other kinds of things in our world, like maybe our relationship to what we are eating, right? Because what we're eating and how we're, you know, whether we're taking care of ourselves is another expression of health, self-love. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure your clients get a wide variety of different benefits and results from this work, is what I'm saying.
Completely, for sure, because also to the degree that we are able to access and feel our own love for ourselves, our own compassion and acceptance for ourselves, is to the same degree that we're going to be comfortable to receive that same depth of love. But when we are in self-judgment and we don't feel lovable, if we have 50% of us that doesn't feel lovable because it doesn't match the person who we should be in our minds, then if somebody tries to love 100% of us, we're only going to let in that love into half of ourselves,
Mhm.
and only until, the more we love ourselves, the more love we have to give, which is going to attract a certain, people that are ready to receive that love. And then if they're ready to receive that love, they're also ready to share that depth of love. And so that love really, really multiplies, as opposed to, when we're in a place of lack, disconnected from love from ourselves, and we're desperately trying to get love from other people. There's always this sense of lack, and it really is about letting that love in. Something that I hear sometimes from some of the women that I have worked with in the past, who start off very, very insecure, believing that all men are XYZ, cheaters, liars, unreliable, they're going to leave, all of that. They may go on a date with somebody so good, so wonderful, and then they think, oh, I'm sure there's something wrong with this guy. I'm sure he's a liar. I'm sure he's a player. And then there's no evidence whatsoever. They're just, even though the evidence is not there, they're already creating it in their heads. And then somebody else who's very secure in themselves might go on a date with somebody really great, and they can see the potential,
Mhm.
for how great they are, and they can see that if they get to know them more, they're probably going to find more of that greatness that they experience. So really, our level of self-love affects our perception about absolutely everything in our lives. Everything.
Yes. And that potential for self-love, it might feel, sometimes if you're running up against like, places in yourself that were unconscious and that, you
Mm-hmm.
didn't know you were still holding on to this memory or this pain. We can feel like frustrated, like, when is it going to be over? When am I going to be finished loving myself?
Mm.
The inverse of that is that
Mm.
it's like endless and limitless, and there's no limit to how much you can experience love.
Yeah.
And actually like really wonderful when you think about it, even though like the practice may sometimes feel like it gets old or something. That what you're doing is you're just continuing to increase your capacity for love.
Yes, yes. And this is such an interesting point because I hear so much of the time, like, I've been working on myself for this many years. I've done this many meditation retreats. When am I going to get there? And I say, get where? Get where? And so the where is always the same. And it's this magical place where when you get there, you're never going to have any issues. You're never going to have unpleasant emotions ever again. You're never going to have issues with anybody because you become so enlightened that you're just good, right? And so then people are holding this fantasy, and so then when an unpleasant emotion comes up, they're like, "But wait, I thought I had gotten there. Maybe all the work that I've been doing didn't work. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not lovable enough." Regressing, maybe I'm too broken. And what I like to say to that is, look, like, we have no control over what is going to come up and when from within. We just don't know. It's what we experienced growing up. How much have we healed and overcome or not? We can't possibly know when we're doing the last layer of really overcoming something for good. It might feel in the moment when we have a breakthrough, oh my God, I think I got it, I've healed this. And it's like another layer comes up, And so it's not so much about what comes up that we have no control over, but it's how are you going to be with yourself when you have an unpleasant experience, when you have an unpleasant emotion? Are you going to abandon yourself because that emotion doesn't match the enlightened idea of who you think you ought to be already because you've worked on yourself for, this long already? Or are you going to stay present with yourself and give to yourself the love that you need so that you don't have to go through something difficult, so that part of you doesn't have to go through something difficult by itself without you. I remember so many times that I was a little girl and I felt scared and sad inside. And my mom she was a single mother of 4 kids, all immigrants, from Nicaragua. And I didn't feel like she had the capacity to give me emotional support, and so I like kept it to myself. And so I had to go through a lot of big emotions as a little girl. And I didn't know how to do that. I needed my mom, And so as an adult, we don't want to do that to ourselves when we're going through something emotional. That is when we need our love the most. That is when we need our love the most. And, that brings me to one of my ultimate intentions, one of my deepest intentions in life is to stay deeply present with myself no matter what comes up, no matter how I feel, no matter what, to just stay present with myself, because I know that without that, there's going to be self-abandonment, not because I don't love myself, not because I'm bad, not because blah, blah, blah. No, but because the mind has these self-protection mechanisms that it's trying to, the brain is trying to get us toward pleasure and away from pain. And so it perceives uncomfortable emotions, the mind perceives uncomfortable emotions as something to try to get away from. And we really want to do the opposite. And so I invite, anybody who's watching this or listening, I invite you to consider taking on this intention for yourself. What would life be like? Even just for the rest of the month, what would life be like for you if you lived from that place of staying present with yourself no matter what, and practicing the 1, 2, 3 exercise of putting your hand where you feel the emotion, taking a breath into it, and number 3, saying to yourself, I'm right here. That's how you stay present with yourself when it's most uncomfortable. If you do that and nothing else, oh my goddess, that's so much, so impactful.
Beautiful. I love that. You gave us a great like how to, something people can go ahead and just try right away. And
Hmm.
being with yourself and not pulling away from or turning away from those difficult spaces. You're right. Like people tend to think that's like counterintuitive. It's like what you want me to turn towards my pain.
Yeah.
That's actually how we undo it. And I mean, I know that
Mm,
the physical like level, because that's very similar to the somatic work that I do, where we're
mm,
turning towards the contraction instead of away from it. Instead of stretching and pulling away from it, we're moving towards the discomfort. And in
mm,
moving towards the discomfort, we're already like pretty much halfway there in terms of unwinding it, right? Like
mm.
that's such a big part of it, is the not leaving, the not turning away,
Amazing.
right?
I love that that works also on a physical level. And that's how these kind of universal truths work, is that you can find them in so many different areas of reality and of life.
Right. Well, that and that just attests to like
Hmm.
why you get the results that you get with clients, and why what you're talking about really works, is because it's part of this true system of how our bodies operate. That we, when we pull away and we walk away from something that is
Hmm.
calling our attention, right? That's not actually going to bring us the peace that we're looking for when we're turning
Yeah.
away. We're
Yeah.
looking for that peace and that comfort, and we think it's by running away from our problems. I mean,
Hmm.
over 18 years old and been through some hard knocks in life knows that you can't run away from your problems forever, right?
They're going to be there when you decide to stop trying to distract yourself away from yourself, you know?
Yeah.
And, the answer and the reason really that somebody may have a fear of abandonment or rejection, I like to come back to that because it's so common. And people say, like, but I want a relationship, I don't understand why I keep attracting, like, unavailable people, or people that keep rejecting me or just not being there, right? And what it is that if they're attracting unavailable, if they're attracting, a sense of a feeling of rejection, it's because they're already, right, like we said, rejecting themselves. And so what people really want to do here is that when it's most challenging to stay with yourself, if you practice staying there with yourself and doing that 1, 2, 3 exercise, the emotion will get processed on its own without you trying to fix it or change it or even heal that emotion, by you simply providing a space of love for that part of you to feel safe, to be expressed. The emotion will get processed by itself. And then the most incredible result that will create is that when you're going through something and you're in the presence of somebody that you care about and they care about you, then you're going to feel safe enough to reveal what you're going through, the challenge that you're going through, expecting from a very healthy place that they're going to want to stay present with you, because that's what you do with yourself. But if you're not comfortable with, and if it's not normal for you to stay present with yourself when you're going through something difficult, then in the future when you're going through something difficult, you're going to expect that to feel like a burden to other people. You're going to imagine that other people are going to see you as a burden. And so again, to really multiply the love in your reality, you want to show up for yourself when it matters the most, when it's most challenging, when it's most uncomfortable and painful, because that if you can show up for yourself with love, then you're gonna be able to let other people's love in so deeply. And that is so powerful and healing, because it's also a gift to other people to be able to love as deeply as they can.
Oh, that's so beautifully said. I mean, I do remember when I was younger and I would be having, pain or issues or problems. And like, I pretty much kind of relegated, like, if I had a boyfriend, they were the one I kind of like dumped my problems on or something, right? And
Mm,
if I was, I didn't really want to tell like all of my friends like what I was going through, because I didn't want to, I was being there for them. That was the role. I was helping them. And if I needed help, then it made me, I don't know, weak, or it made me like something. I
yeah.
had some judgment about it, or
Hmm.
change the dynamic, and I didn't want to burden them or upset them, that, you know,
Mm,
that I didn't have it figured out or something. And that really did
mm.
start shifting, you know, as my perspective and my relationship to myself started shifting, where suddenly now I see, you know, if I'm going through something, and it could be, you know, an emotional thing, or, you know, I mean, I guess, yeah, it's all at the end of the day, a lot of emotional things. It's fear,
Yep.
it's worry, it's frustration about something. You know, I will look for, who can I connect with who would be like the right person to just hold that space for me in my process, you know, whether it's a friend or, you know, now I hire coaches and work with
Mm-hmm.
people on these different levels that, you know, they're offering. And it's really a strength and not a weakness. It's really a reflection
Mm,
of my own self-love that I reach
mm-hmm.
out and ask for that support, right? And ask
Mm-hmm.
for that yeah, that space from others. It's because I have become more able to give that to myself that I'm able to receive that. So what you're saying, I feel like, is
Mm-hmm.
totally resonant, totally, I'm with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And another way to say that really is whatever is familiar in your experience of yourself and your relationship with yourself, whatever thoughts, feelings, beliefs that you have about yourself that are familiar to you, whether they're true or not, that is what's going to feel most comfortable and familiar to experience with other people.
Mm, yes. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. That it's interesting that you know, the thing about the familiarity is that it's often like the thing that we're, you know, maybe not so happy about. It's that pattern. It's the
Mm-hmm.
thing that we're not really happy about, and yet we keep kind of
Mm.
going back to it. And why that might be, and I've
Mm-hmm.
explored this a bit myself, is because we don't know what's going to happen in that unknown territory.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We don't maybe know who we are yet when we have like a happy relationship, or we may
Mm.
dream about it, but it's
Mm-hmm.
still kind of a mystery. It's still unknown when
Mm-hmm.
we go back to what's familiar, even though it's not
Mm-hmm.
really working, you know, and
Totally.
until we can start to sense like, oh, this possibility of like, well, anything could happen. I could, you know, my whole life could be totally different. I could be a totally different person. As we start to like try that on slowly and get more comfortable with the idea. And I think you were talking about that earlier, like getting used to this new version of myself that it has, you know, a sense of self-worth and self-esteem. Got to get used to it slowly, because in the beginning it makes
Mm-hmm.
it kind of scary.
Yeah, anything that is new to us and unfamiliar is going to feel awkward. Like oftentimes I will have people be sitting in front of a mirror to do the coaching call, you know, in with on Zoom. And people hate this initially. They're like, oh, I don't want to look, you know, all these, my hair, my pimples, my makeup, my this, that, the other thing, whatever, you know. And it's mirror work that I like to do with people so that they can have these very in-depth, detailed dialogues with themselves to work things out. Because if we have an issue with somebody, the only way we're going to work it out is by dialoguing with them. So if we have an issue with ourselves, then we got to dialogue with ourselves, you know? And so in the beginning, people, when I have them say to themselves, you know, I see you, and looking into their eyes, and I feel you, and it makes sense what you're experiencing because XYZ, and you went through this as a kid, and now, you know, we're going to do things differently, and here's how we're going to change things, you know, and I love you. And they're like, ooh. And, you know, I say, it's okay. How many times did you tell yourself you love yourself, you know, in the mirror your whole life? They're like, I don't think I ever did. And I'm like, well, no wonder it feels unfamiliar. So you just got to say it a few more times, you know, and then they'll say, well, I feel like I don't believe it. And I'm like, well, let's address the part of you that doesn't believe it, you know? And so then I'll have them talk to the part of themselves in front of the mirror that doesn't believe the love. Like, hey, you know, I see that there's a part of you that does not believe and is not letting in the love that I'm trying to give to you. And that makes sense because I've been neglecting you all this time. And, you know, and I'm willing to give you the time that you need to really get that I'm right here and I'm here to stay, you know, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to heal my relationship with you, you know. And then I have them say, and I love you, I care about you, you're important to me. And then they feel it for real. you know?
Oh,
So just because you don't feel your love right away, it doesn't mean that you just can't love yourself. It just means that you have to deal with whatever is showing up that is asking to be dealt with on the way to you being able to access your own love.
this is such beautiful, beautiful work. I think what you're doing is amazing. Thank you so much for
Mm,
sharing such detail about what you're doing too, because it really gives people, I think, for me, I just you get like the experience of being in that and the beautiful way that you're modeling that care and attention, that you're really giving people this intimate experience with themselves
mhm.
through your beingness, through your being there with them until they're fully, completely ready to do that for themselves. You
Yes.
know,
Yes.
so amazing.
And
Yes.
really, because I specialize in love, romantic love, self-love, and all that, if somebody wants a happy, healthy, thriving, lifelong relationship with somebody, that to me means deep emotional, spiritual intimacy with somebody, like deep closeness, total closeness. And in order to be comfortable with that and expect that that's going to happen, the mirror work is to build that within the self, that
Mm.
intimacy, because then the loneliness goes away, because the closeness with ourselves takes its place.
Mm.
So
Yes.
that's really the cure for loneliness, right? We can say, oh, I'm lonely because I'm single. I'm like, oh, I don't think you're lonely because you're single. I think there's something else going on. Let's take a look together and bring some love there where, where it's being called. When we can really feel that intimate with our own experience, then we can create that naturally with other people. And that's really the best way to create a healthy, loving relationship is, to um, create it from experience with ourselves, and then to keep deepening it, of course, once we're in that relationship.
Yes. Oh, it's so beautiful the way you kind of have brought all these different elements together, and so much of it I feel like is in your practice and in your experience because you're embodying it. And that's the key
Mm.
here, for what you're actually teaching other people to do is actually embody love.
Mm-hmm.
Have it
Mm-hmm.
in your body, that it's actually generated by you, that
Mm-hmm.
you're experiencing it because it's not coming from somewhere. It's being
Mm-hmm.
generated internally,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah. So this is an embodiment of
Mm-hmm.
love
That's
practice.
right. It's about being the love that you've been seeking everywhere else and everybody else. It's about being the love that you want to experience with other people.
Yes, this is so powerful. Thank you.
You're
Thank you for
welcome.
coming on. Yeah, and sharing this with everybody. It's such a potent message. You work
Mm,
one-on-one with people, is that correct?
I do,
Yeah.
yes.
So if somebody wanted to connect with you and learn more about what you do, where would they be able to find more information?
Yes, you can go to my website, lovecoachforwomen.com, and book a free consultation so that we can have a conversation about what's going on for you and how I may be able to support you, and then we can take it from there.
Wonderful. Yes, because and the more
Hmm.
that we have people in this world who, and women in this world who love themselves and who are
Hmm.
generating love from within, like just the less
Mm.
problems we have and will have in society for sure.
Absolutely. I really, truly believe that for sure.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing this incredible work that you're doing today. It
Mm.
was so inspiring. I'm sure that our
Mm.
listeners got a lot out of it and were able to reflect on all their experiences, like we brought up really interesting, I think very relevant stuff for women that's going on with a lot of
Mm.
people, I could definitely relate.
Absolutely. Yes, yes, very much. We're all on the path, and we got to just keep going. And another thing that I want to share that's a very powerful resource is a self-love meditation that I have that you can do in front of the mirror to start your self-love mirror practice. And that's on SoundCloud. So you can find me there too, Love Coach for Women on SoundCloud, and access that self-love meditation for free. And yeah, and then the message that I want to really leave everybody with, and first of all, thank you as well, Amy, for inviting me to this awesome conversation. But really, my message to everybody listening is that regardless of where you are in your life, regardless of where you're at in your relationship with yourself or in your love life, just know that the solution to practically most, if not all, of the problems that you may be experiencing is in really beginning to love and be there for yourself. Because I truly believe that the most important skill in life is loving and being there for ourselves and getting better and better at that all the time.
Yes, incredible. I agree. This is so wonderful. Thank you so much. And
You're
yeah,
welcome.
yes, feel free to reach
Yay.
out to Gemini if you have curiosities, if this talk was speaking to you. And maybe we'll have her on again to broach a different subject, because I think you have multi passions that would be fun to explore in other ways.
Totally.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you too.
You've been listening to the Free Your Soma podcast. To find out more information about today's guest, check the show notes. And to find out more information about me, Amy Takaya, and the Radiance program, visit www.freeyoursoma.com.